The real question is, if there's no scarcity in the internet, and there isn't, how much of this becomes unnecessary and could be done as disparate projects? Assume there's no scarcity between what you want to do and where the destination, and it could remove the scarcity. So assume I've done that.
So I think you're getting at capacity.
Yeah, there's no capacity limit.
But there is.
That's the point is, where is that limit?
I don't know, but it's somewhere south of everybody who wants to watch the Super Bowl
Okay,
at
no,
the same time.
I've been designing Internet protocols, nearly half a century and working on the networks. And the assumption you're making is that there is a bottleneck. If you simply put something like Akamai or $100 box which splits out streams anywhere, if you want a broadcast model, you can expand arbitrarily.
Okay, but it's not just capacity, it's also cost.
Gordon,
So in the unicast world,
you're willing to, okay, let's not get into that argument. I can argue why it's not cost, but let's accept the assumption that there's no capacity or cost limit.
How much? Can't accept that.
but that's not a real.
Okay, I guess then we differ. I've been through trillions of times of Moore's law and have seen it. I can explain why the internet does not have a cost capacity limit. But if you don't want me to grant that, you're going to spend billions of dollars betting against me.
Down at the physical layer, to what extent is there any consideration for flexibility or building the standard to deal with peak to average ratios? I realize for a large flamethrower, maybe that's not a big deal, but for low power TV and translators and stuff, maybe that's an issue. And I don't know, we want to take the questions one at a time. I'll throw the other one on the table too. And
I can address that one.
okay, start with that.
For the PAPR, our peak to average power ratio, there are some mitigation techniques that we include in the standard. OFDM itself typically runs around 8 to 9 dB of peak to average power ratio. 8 VSB is typically around 6.5. So we know there's some room to improve, and we do have those mitigation techniques like ACE built into the standard if a broadcaster chooses to use it. So yes, we do have that there. For devices, they're not going to care. They're just going to receive the signal as it comes, and they'll deal with it. So there are certain headrooms in an A to D and certain backoffs that they set to make sure they can get the peaks that come in through the tuner. But there are some mitigation techniques to make it similar to what we have today on ATSC1.
I was thinking about special case translators for low power stations.
Okay, for those, yeah, it's when a studio sets up a service for the physical layer, it is signaled for all towers of emission. So for the low power SFN networks or low power translators and whatnot, they are signaled from a studio, and that studio sets up for their network what they want. So it should follow the same PAPR signaling.
The application presentation layer, I guess I'm really intrigued by that because I've always thought interactive TV is going to do something, and I kind of get the idea that there could be a client that, browses that sort of thing. But is there anything that's under the ATSC banner dealing with middleware or supporting applications or downloading applications or mobile operating systems rather than just, an IP pipe browser client?
I really feel like the browser client is the way to go.
And in fact, the hope is that most of what ATSC is specifying in terms of the interactive applications could work equally well in an off-the-shelf browser as it could on a browser that's integrated into a television set. As I mentioned, we have a few APIs that we're adding, but we're being very careful not to change the W3C standard or add anything to it. Perhaps ultimately the W3C standard itself will evolve to include some of these things, but we're using a WebSocket technology for exchanging information that's unique to televisions so that we don't have to change or alter the W3C technology. The hope is that one of the reasons I think that interactive television has not gained traction in the past is because it's so very expensive to author applications. They have to be authored so that they fit on all these different screens with all sorts of different on-screen graphic display, drawing engines. I was in some of the Cable Labs interops when EBIF and OCAP was being worked on, and every single set-top box had different capabilities. The aspect ratios were wrong, the colors looked different, the fonts were all messed up. It went on and on. So the goal is to make it as close to a real browser experience as possible, and most television sets are going to have a built-in browser that's probably going to be tweaked a little bit for their environment. But when you come to authoring, there's two things that are really helpful. One is that you might be authoring these apps for the web anyways, and so you can port them over to this platform hopefully fairly easily. But even more important than that, the skills needed to author an app are not specialty skills. They're your basic web developer people. And so you can actually find people to author these apps for you, as opposed to when the platforms were proprietary to television. It was such a specialized world, very difficult to find developers, very expensive, and you wouldn't necessarily know what you were going to expect from the world of devices. So we really felt strongly this was the way to go. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. The reason I asked is there was so much energy a while back going into looking middleware like ACAP and OCAP, and now there seems to be Android TV is what's there. But I just wonder if there is some bridge you can build that allows you to deliver the IP stream to something that is not under your umbrella, but is not just a browser.
Yeah, it really is sticking closely to the W3C standards. That's the holy grail, and that's what we're trying very, very hard to do. And we're having lots and lots and lots of discussions about that.
The only thing I'd add to that is that the ATSC takes very seriously the fact that it is an emission spec only. It does not do anything or say anything about the receiver, the client, and that's the realm of CTA or other bodies. And so we're just trying to specify as clearly as possible the emission, even to the interactive domain, and rely on web standards to carry it, and then the rest is up to implementers to how they want to do it. Michael?
Really quick questions coming for Rich. ATSC 3.0, what is the equivalent of PSIP programs?
There's actually two parts. PSIP's a little bit weird because it mixes signaling, what's happening now, and announcement, what's happening in the future. In 3.0, we have an announcement standard, A332, 332, which is essentially the electronic service guide. And then we have signaling within the transport standard, A331, which binds all these things together, what's happening now, what elements are there, and so on. So the equivalent of PSIP is there, but it's separated out into different pieces, and the different pieces are done differently. We learned some things.
I would just mention that, as some of the folks were pointing out, that with the ATSC process, we have first working drafts, then we have candidate standards, then we have proposed standards, and finally we have a final standard, which is never final because it probably can be changed going forward. But all of these documents in terms of where they stand and where they're at, and there's how many documents altogether, Rich? 20. They're all available on the Open ATSC website at atsc.org. So anybody who wants to go poking at this a little bit, it's readily available there.
Once they're candidate standards, there's like 3 or 4 that aren't yet, but
Yeah, exactly. But
Once they're mature enough that we feel they're ready for public.
the meaty ones are all there, I guess.
One other comment or observation with ATS 3.0. It strikes me
Now, how similar that standard is to other worldwide standards that are out there, such as IEEE, in terms of look at what's happening in each of the layers, even the physical layer, it seems to be a lot of architectural similarity. So an observation or a comment, I'm interested if you read that.
Well, the layers are sort of, but
Devil's in the details.
The details. So there are differences in the phi layer, partly because we did it later. Technology moved on, there's new techniques, new things are learned. DVB was one of the participants, is a participant in our work. Once you get above the phi layer, there are huge differences. Well, no. The transport layer is totally different. We have stepped away from MPEG-2 transport. DVB doesn't want to do that yet. When it comes into the codec layer, there are some similarities, timing. So there are similarities. More and more we're finding that we're working together. I mean, when I first started, it was us versus them, and not invented here. There's a lot more, but there's also a lot of deployed devices, and depending on the cycle, like personal opinion, DVB-T2 is good. ATSC3 is better. But given the number of deployed devices using DVB-T2, would it make sense for DVB to go to ATSC3? Economically, that's a hard one. So.
Similarity doesn't mean interoperability, obviously, so that's basically where. But yeah, you're right. There hopefully is less, and that was one of our initial goals. Actually, was to try to create a common world standard, or at least reduce the differences.
Thank you for those of you who are here, and tell those who weren't here what they missed.